Guys, I wanted to put a video together because there seems to be two camps that are breeding within the fitness industry, especially right now, when it comes to building muscle tissue. So we seem to have the progressive overload is the only way to grow muscle, and we have the other end of the spectrum, which is exercise, execution, biomechanics, minute detail of exercise with very minimal people actually making progress. And what I want to do with this video is give you my take on both ends of the spectrum and then share with you my view on what I believe is optimal for muscle development. So let's take a look at muscle growth in terms of progressive overload. This camp has the belief that muscle building will only come from pushing weight as the only kind of variable. So driving load up continuously. So the end of that spectrum is bodybuilders that have been doing this for 15, even 20 years, big guys that have put on a lot of muscle tissue over that period of time, and they've done a phenomenal job, can't take it away from them. And wherein lies the problem is that that end of the spectrum probably can't relate back to when they first started lifting, and they had to understand how to develop lagging body parts. They had to learn how to execute an exercise, because all of us know when we first start training, nothing feels right, and it takes a while for things to feel right. So the progressive overload camp is kind of saying, let's just keep pushing load. Now let me explain a couple of things that happens. If you keep pushing load and you have optimal biomechanics and you've been training and you're stable for a long time and you're stable around your structure, then yes, you're going to grow, and you're going to grow very well, because one of the mechanisms by which muscles grow is progressively overloading the muscle. So that end of the spectrum is very right. But let's look at the market of people that are learning from this camp. Most people are new to training. Most people are stuck at an intermediate level and are struggling to develop muscle. Now, take away the progressive overload camp and look at the optimal execution camp. Now, this side of the spectrum looks at teaching movement patterns, which is exactly where a lot of the newer progressive overload camp really should be. And if we just look at the progressive overload second to just one more second, if you are driving heavy loads, there will come a point where one of the major muscles that you're trying to develop is unable to develop and maintain tension within that muscle. So that's where tension can be displaced to delts in a press, for example. Tension can be displaced to the triceps, which they are involved in the movement, but we want to predominantly make sure tension's within the chest. So if load is your predominant load factor to determine growth of the muscle, you've got to be able to maintain tension in that area. And if you can't, then there is going to be limitations to you making progress, i.e. stability in your scapula. It could be overdeveloped muscle groups not allowing you to lock down with the thoracic and lock down with the lower traps. So that person would probably need to regress slightly and make those areas strong. Well, that then moves across to the exercise execution template or camp. And the exercise execution camp really looks at structure, biomechanics, exercise execution, i.e. training a muscle with perfect execution. And I talked about something at great length called exercise execution. And exercise execution is being able to maintain tension on a muscle from the extremities through to the shortened range. So the bench press here through to the relatively shortened position. Now, if you're new to training or intermediate to training and you haven't gone through the education phase, inevitably you're going to hit a plateau. Inevitably you're going to probably pick up injuries, tendon injuries, joint problems, you name it. If you suddenly hop skip into the progressive overload camp, you are inevitably going to hit potential injuries if you haven't learned how to contract your glutes, you haven't learned how to make your spine strong, you haven't learned how to stabilize your shoulder blades, and when you add in things like squats and deadlifts and Romanian deadlifts, you're going to pick up problems and later down the line have to take a step back. So where is this all going? Progressive overload is essential part of developing muscles. Learning exercise execution is hugely important. But exercise execution people are focused so much on squeezing the muscle, contracting the muscle, they forget that progressive overload is still an important factor of that format. So we have a camp that just literally don't make any progress because they're continually just squeezing muscle and not adding load. But we also have the end of the spectrum where people are lifting way too much weight for that individual muscle to be able to develop optimally, and they need to regress a little bit more. So where do we really meet up? Well, let me tell you this. I've been through the whole spectrum of this. My team have been through the whole spectrum of this. We've all gained 20, 30 kilos of muscle tissue and of lean mass over the lifetime of our training. And we've done progressive overload, but then you need to revisit exercise execution at points because something's not progressing. We've all taught beginners, intermediate, exercise execution, but the fundamental way they build muscle continually is progressing the load. So without bouncing too much between the two, let me come into the middle. Building muscle is about having a toolbox. Within that toolbox, whether you're a beginner, intermediate or advanced, is exercise execution, how to execute an exercise perfectly, how to maintain tension on a muscle, how to go through all the variables of hypertrophy, so whether it's lactic acid training, whether it's blood volume training, whether or not it's eccentric training, all the different variables, you've got to learn all those, right through to progressively increasing the load. But you can't at the expense of poor execution. So we're coming into the middle of this toolbox of muscle hypertrophy, how a muscle grows. And that end of the spectrum is right, that end of the spectrum is right, but for maximal muscle development, everything needs to come together and at the most appropriate time. So I wanted to stop a lot of the confusion for you, because don't jump onto one end of the spectrum or stay at one end of the spectrum without considering the full spectrum of muscle hypertrophy, because they're all important. And one other area that people don't often think about, which is something that myself and all my team and all my clients are taught to bring together, is nutrition. Because to build a muscle, you need to be increasing food progressively over time. And if you're not increasing food and your weight's not going up and you're not increasing tissue and you're not getting stronger, then a lot of the other variables aren't going to work. So let's just summarize this. Everything that you're hearing from educated resources, from people in different camps is right. But the real right answer is piecing it together at the right time for you, your experience level, your stability, your structure, and your outcome, the goal. So guys, I hope that's brought some kind of format together for you and made you realize that both ends of the spectrum aren't wrong, but the toolbox is what has the secret formula in it for you. Good luck, guys.